Welcome back to Sailing El Jaleo. At the end of last week's video, we were almost all of the way up Chesapeake Bay. After fighting against the current all day, we ducked into Still Pond Inlet for one night, and from there it was just a short trip up to Bohemia River, where we were staging to catch the current through the C&D Canal the next morning. From there we went through the C&D Canal, and we entered the Delaware River, and we just came right around the corner here to make it back to our home base, which is the Delaware City Marina. I guess we might as well go ahead and get right into it. Grab a drink, climb aboard, and let's get going. After spending a peaceful evening at Still Pond Inlet, we got up early-ish the next morning so we could catch the current all the way up to Bohemia River. It was a short trip, it was only like 10 or 12 miles, somewhere in there, but we wanted to catch the current because it does make a significant difference. In Chesapeake Bay, it's not so easy to align yourself with the currents. You know, the Intracoastal Waterway has three distinct or discrete sections. The lower Intracoastal Waterway along the coast, say from Beaufort, North Carolina south down to Florida, you can control your speed over ground in relation to the moving water column quite well. There are days when we weren't aligned with the currents where we could make minor trips to reach transition points between inlets, and then when we would reset ourselves in relationship to the currents, so then in the subsequent days we were riding with the currents again. So we would have to do minor resets along the route, but we could maximize our speed over ground and increase our fuel efficiency by always riding with the currents. And you can do that if you're not in a hurry. You can do that reasonably well along the coastal region of the Intracoastal Waterway. From Beaufort, North Carolina up to Norfolk, it's a little bit different because that region, you've got big bodies of water, you've got the Neuse River, you've got Pamlico River, Pamlico Sound, Albemarle Sound, the Alligator River, and so on and so forth. These big bodies of water are slightly inland, and it's such a large water sink that tides really don't impact those regions in the same way they do along the coast, where the geography is much different. And in those areas, the wind actually drives the current and the tides, and it's very minor. So you might, whereas in Georgia, you might get a 9.5-foot tide swing. If the wind is blowing moderately strong, say in the Neuse River, you might only get a 12 to 18 inch tide change. So they're completely different animals, and you kind of have to know how to work around those in those regions to optimize your travel. And in Chesapeake Bay, you're really just at the mercy of the bay. There's not much you can do, especially when you're going up the bay, because the bay has a natural flow, which is out to sea, as you would expect. But then the tides also surge up the bay, so you get a distorted tide cycle or a distorted current cycle, where the majority of the day the flow is flowing out to sea, and then you've got shorter periods where the flow is flowing up the bay. So especially on long trips, you're really at the mercy of it. There's nothing you can do. You can't realign yourself in relation to the tides like you can do on the coast. So the previous day to this, we were running against the tide the whole day, and that can be pretty frustrating. It wasn't the whole day, but it was the majority of the day, and it is what it is. There was nothing we could do to change that. So it was nice to get up early this next morning and catch a boost up to Bohemia River and make really good time. I think it only took us maybe 2.5, 3 hours to get up there. And then we had the rest of the day to hang out before realigning ourselves with the current the next morning, go through the C&D Canal. Our night in Bohemia River was absolutely wonderful. We had a monster thunderstorm. It was the biggest thunderstorm we had had that entire season. It was awesome. There was thunder and lightning ripping everywhere. It was wonderful. We were down below nice and warm. We had the sound of rain on the deck all night, which is one of my favorite things. And the next morning, I had actually underestimated how much rain we had gotten. And I glanced back in the dinghy. It was quite a ways back. On windy, stormy nights, I give Frank a little bit of extra line just so he's not banging up against the El Jaleo. And I glanced back and it looked like there was about an inch of water in Frank. So, okay, an inch of water. I definitely wouldn't have hauled Frank that way, you know, if we were on any normal trip, but we were on our trip back to Delaware City. We were going through the C&D Canal. The current was going to be with us, so I knew it wasn't going to be a major speed imposition. So I decided, you know what, let's get going, and then I'll just empty Frank once we get back to the marina. And as we got going, I realized that there was a heck of a lot more water in Frank than what I thought. So by this point we had traveled about a mile from where we had anchored, and we were heading up towards the entrance to the C&D Canal. And where we had anchored the night before, we were protected from the wind. I knew the wind was going to be blowing out of the south, so we anchored along that south shore, and it was nice and calm all night. And there were, I think, 3 other boats with us that night. So once I got out into the chop, I realized there was probably 3 to 3.5 inches of water in Frank, and we just couldn't tow him that way. And we were in deep enough water. We were out of the channel. It was a little choppy, but I figured let's just go ahead. I'll drop the anchor. I'll get out one of our winches, and I'll just winch Frank up and flip him over, get the water out, and then we'll be on our way. So, and that's what we did. It was a little rough. You know, the camera fell over, but, you know, it was doable. We were not in any danger or anything. Once I was hauling the anchor back up, the anchor did jump out of the winch. And, you know, sometimes you just have reflexes and you don't think about things you do, you just do them. And the anchor I've got is an 88-pound Rockna, and when that decides to go rogue, you just let it go. You don't try and do anything to stop it. Once it gets to the bottom, then you haul it back in. But reflexively, I tried to stop it, which was a big mistake. So I smashed my thumb in the winch, and thankfully it was not, I didn't break my thumb, but it was a pretty good pinch. So yeah, don't do that. If your anchor goes rogue, just let it go. But we eventually got back underway, and we made our way up to the C&D Canal. Once we entered the C&D Canal, we were out of the wind. The current was going in our direction. I think we were going 6.5 knots, which is unheard of for us. You know, our normal cruising speed is 3.8 knots. That's in slack tide, so, you know, 6.5 is warp speed. I almost didn't even know how to control the boat. We were going so fast. But anyways, I digress. So we took the C&D Canal actually connects the Chesapeake Bay to the Delaware Bay, right at the top of both of the bays. So it is a man-made canal. It's very deep. Lots of ships use it. And we made our way through to the Delaware River. After making it through the C&D Canal, it's just a short trip up the Delaware River to make it to the entrance canal to the Delaware City Marina. And this is my most feared part of the entire trip. Now, you guys know my checkered history with docking. I suck at it. I don't do it very often. I dock less than 10 times a year. I spend all of my time at anchor. You know, it's not, and I hate docking. It's not land. Typically, unless you're in the Southern Ocean, it's not land that makes you sink. Or I'm sorry, I screwed that up. It's not water that makes you sink, it's land that makes you sink. Hitting land, 9 times out of 10 is what's going to sink a boat. It's not hitting water, which makes sense. So, entering that canal is always stressful, and I would never enter that canal when the current is going in the direction that I'm traveling, because there is a bridge at the end of that canal, and it's only maybe 10, 12 feet high, and obviously I cannot fit under that. And if you can't turn around in the canal, an El Jaleo does not work backwards. She just does not. She's got a full keel. She is very unresponsive, especially at slow speeds. A full keel is great for most situations, but it is not good for precise steering. There's a lag, or there's a lapse, especially at very low speeds. The full keel really impacts your input on the tiller and the rudder, and it's difficult, and I hate docking. So this is not a Delaware City Marina problem. This is a me problem. And for some reason, the sadistic bastards, I love everyone there. They're awesome. But they always put me right down next to the bridge. And I get it. I understand why they do that. They know I'm coming in to get hauled out, so I'm going to be in the water for a week or two until they can get me hauled out. And they like to use the rest of the dock for transients. So it's nothing, you know, it's nothing against them. It's just, this is a me problem. I don't like docking. This is very stressful for me. And this year was a little tricky. So I was at the, you know, normally when you're coming into a fuel dock, you can pull in forward, you can slow down, and you can dock, and it's not a problem. Here there was a boat down at the very end of the dock. I had to tuck in behind, right next to the bridge, and I didn't want to hit the boat behind me, and the dock technically wasn't long enough for me to be there. It was, I mean, the front 10 feet of the boat, I mean, it was, but the front 10 feet of the boat was extending beyond the dock. It's still safe, but it's just, I didn't like the situation. Let's just put it that way. So it was a stressful end to a very successful year, I'll put it that way. And once we got docked, then I got the puppy dogs off the boat. My mother came over and grabbed the pups, and then I started tearing everything down. And that's all we have time for this week. I would like to give a massive shout out to my Patreon crew. Without your guys' support, I wouldn't make these videos. And my Patreon crew is Joan and Juddy Judnick, Val and Chris Alcorn, Denise and Eli Sackett, Sherry Erickson, Deb Shaw, Matthew Spotton, Peter Allen, and Natalie Linehan. Thank you guys so very much. Your support really means the world to me. I do have one legacy patron member, and her name is Joan Linbo. Unfortunately, she has passed on, but she lives on in our hearts forever. We really miss you, Joan. If you are interested in joining our Patreon crew, there is a link in the description down below, and that'll take you to our Patreon page where you can sign up. And there are hundreds, literally hundreds of extra videos and photos of our travels, and I try and keep everything there up to date and post at least once or twice a week, so it gives you a little peek behind the curtain. If you do like our videos, please like, comment, and subscribe. That'll help us out more than you'll ever know, and that actually doesn't cost you anything, so hit that like button. Alrighty, I hope you all are well, and we'll see you next week.